People that have gone to jail or prison or worked there, what are your most interesting, funny, scary, or gross stories? First night in prison, 19 years old. Let me set the scene. Took all day to drive up there, get bugged, strip and cavity searched, and get into a cell on receiving. June 2002, SoCal, so it's like 100 degrees inside and out with no ventilation. CIW prison was surrounded by cows, so the stench was thick in the hot air. And there were flies everywhere. They had those bug-zapping lights everywhere, so flies would just rain down. Waited in a chain-link cage, wearing XL Orange California CDC prisoner pants and shirt. I was 110 pounds, so I was swimming in that crap. So the first night I finally walked in my cell with my little net bag of hygiene stuff and a nasty rough sheet or blanket thing. I meet my bunkie, some call them cellies, huge woman, like 6'2" and 200 pounds, about 50 years old, with a short butch haircut, acne scars and pit marks, saggy tiggle bitties, and no teeth. Forgot her name. Me, 19, 4'10", and 110 pounds. I proceeded to make my bed on the top bunk and lay down. She introduces herself. She talked like a child and almost sounded like she was hearing impaired. She clearly had mental disabilities, but she was nice. Could be worse, right? Well, after we introduced ourselves and got cozy in our beds, there was like a 20-minute moment of silence. Suddenly, out of nowhere, with no warning at all, this woman starts punching the underside of the top bunk, with me on the top side. She was repeatedly punching the bed under me and whispering in a completely different and deep voice. "I see you, demon. You can't hide from me. Shut up, leave me alone." I laid as still as I could, thinking this is not happening to me right now. I just stared at the window, hoping she didn't confuse me with the demon she was seeing. She then got up and began punching the air and arguing with herself and the demon. I don't remember if I slept at all that night and how long that particular behavior lasted. That lady had issues, and I was nothing but nice to her. I learned to ignore her outbursts. She would be normal for a while, and then she would just jolt her head sideways and talk to demons in that deep whisper voice. During the day, anyways. The punching of the bed continued every night. I felt really sorry for her. She wasn't all there and she needed help, but was just thrown in prison instead. She told me she was homeless and stayed in LA and was in there for doing substances. Showed me her needle scars from shooting up hard substances. That brings tears to my eyes still. I hope she eventually got help. I doubt it, though, with the way the system was and is. In court, I can't remember, but it was some prop people voted for, and mostly everyone in prison was there because of it. I only bunked with her for a few weeks before they moved her to the yard to do her time. Bless her soul, even though she scared the living hell out of me. And thank you, Jesus, for watching over me. I was never really that religious before prison, but let's just say there's a blessed cross hanging above my front door right now. Story 2. I worked at the Clark County Jail in downtown Las Vegas when I was about 18 or 19. My mom was a nurse there and got me a job as a file clerk. Saw a lot of crazy stuff. Some random stuff I remember. Not too much with the prisoners themselves. One time, a guy wearing a vest that would tase him if an officer pushed a button lunged at me to test if the officer would do it. He didn't. Found out later he was in the vest for breaking the warden's arm. Also, at times, I'd be alone in an elevator and a corrections officer would load a ton of shackled prisoners in. So I'd be backed into a corner surrounded by a bunch of huge guys. They weren't supposed to do that. The smell of the kitchen. It was right under the intake area where all the drunks from the night before would be doing their business everywhere. The horrid smell and all the others would float down to the kitchen and combine with the powdered eggs being mushed in plastic bags, huge vats of chili and spaghetti. It was gross and stayed in your nose all day. John Wayne Bobbitt came through booking once and a bunch of nurses got his autograph for some reason. I'd see the place I worked on Cop sometimes. That's how I discovered the chair I would sit in to look through medical files was also the chair they did particular tests on girls in by taking blood. One of the male nurses who was a huge degenerate came into the office while staring down the hallway. Found out later he was looking at Elizabeth Berkley. She was filming Showgirls and they had a scene inside the jail that was cut. You can still see behind her in a scene where she's being released. I missed seeing her by about 5 seconds. My mom also ruined a scene for a film they were shooting in the lobby by not realizing she was in the shot and watching. It wasn't Showgirls, some other film starring Danny DeVito. My brother would pick me up from work sometimes and would also give random dudes who were just released rides home. I did not think that was a good idea. One of the nurses I talked to a lot on my breaks got fired and busted for stealing some pills. One of the female corrections officers fell in love with an inmate and got fired, and then got caught trying to sneak in to visit him wearing a wig. The head of the medical department got fired because he and some other had a poll going for which prisoners with serious medical conditions would pass first. Pretty messed up to be in charge of a person's well-being if you stand to win money if he passed sooner. It was a massive dirtbag, and I was glad to hear he threw a fit and had to be chased around his desk before security escorted him out. Not exactly related to the jail, but one of the nurses my mom worked with would also work at one of the major hospitals in Vegas. For some reason, when Tupac passed away, she called my mom and told her. I went on to a rap forum in IRC and told everyone. They got really pissed off, calling me a liar. And about 20 minutes later, it was announced on the radio and they were devastated. I always think of that when people are like, Tupac is still alive. Probably a bunch of other stuff I don't remember. I spent a lot of time in a back office room photocopying medical files. It was depressing at times. Honestly, the prisoners were pretty okay. The corrections officers would mess with me a lot, though. There were huge, heavy pneumatic doors that they'd control from another room, and I'd have to show my badge to a camera to be let into another area or let on or off an elevator. Sometimes they just wouldn't let me in for a while or screw with me over the intercom, or they'd start the door shutting the second I started walking through it, scaring me because I'm pretty sure those things could take off a member. Now I think prison is a lot of fun. Story 3. I remember being a rep for my dorm and getting called up to the bubble by the lieutenant with the other reps, and he opens the window and leans out of the bubble with an entire cheesecake in one hand and a bottle of Jack Daniels in the other. And he looks at us and goes, "Can anyone identify these 2 items?" Now for a second I thought we were all going to get cheesecake and booze, which in jail is pretty high up there on the good day-o meter. But that wasn't the case. We all stayed quiet, so he eventually answered for us. "This is a cheesecake. This is a bottle of Jack. I bring a cheesecake and a bottle of Jack to every shift. And if at the end of the day there's still cheesecake in that plate or Jack in that bottle, that means you a-holes have created paperwork for me during the day. Now we'll screw your stuff up. Good day, gentlemen." With that, he closed the window. Didn't even call a deputy to let us back into our cells. We had to go to another bubble and ask them to pop the lock. Story 4. I've worked in a prison for some time in medical. What surprised me more than anything else is how many inmates have serious mental illnesses and below normal IQ. Like, no matter how bad and common you may think it is, it's really bad and even more common. A lot of them don't even belong in prison. They definitely shouldn't be out in the street, but they in society would benefit a lot more from keeping them in an environment where they can get real treatment. Prison makes them so much worse. I'll tell you a story. One time, one such inmate was having a fit and asking to speak to someone from behavioral health. Well, it was a night shift and we didn't have any BH professionals on duty at the time. So I agreed to go talk to him. He was black male in his 30s, past violent offender. It turned out that he was angry because he had gone moved from one cell to another and his radio had gone damaged and some of his stuff was missing. He was frustrated. It didn't feel like he was getting an explanation. The inmate thought it was because everyone hated his music. "They always be complaining about my music and that's why they broke my radio," he said. And to emphasize the point, he turned the radio on full blast with one of Duran Duran's songs playing. When he turned it off after a few seconds, I remarked, "Well, I think that's outrageous. Who would have a problem with Duran Duran?" I got him, "You like Duran Duran?" "Oh yeah, my sister was the biggest fan in the 80s, played them all the time, which means I was listening too." The inmate's mood changed and he showed me his property form that had everything and asked me to verify that the radio was recorded as undamaged in the form. As I looked at it, I noticed that he had a box of crayons listed among his possessions. I asked him what sorts of things he draws and colors. The inmate pulled out a folder containing some blank coloring pages that he had of various things. I saw one picture of an owl and mentioned that I like owls. He told me he'd color it for me. "I'll tell you what then. If you promise to color that owl for me, I'll come back tomorrow and visit you to see how you're doing. Deal?" He agreed to it. The next day I showed up and the guy was absolutely jubilant. The owl was perfectly colored and he insisted that I take it. He couldn't stop talking about it either and he remarked somewhere in the middle, "All my life my folks told me not to trust white people, but you did what you said you would." It was such a small damn thing, and it mattered to this man to the point that it made him question the negativity that may have led him to the hard place he found himself in. I will never forget how happy he was right then. For my part, I still have that owl picture hanging in my refrigerator. Wow. Oh my god. This story is heartbreaking and so sad, yet somehow hopeful. What this guy did and how he responded was wholesome. The other part of the story sucks, especially for the situation of this guy. I got that he was a violent offender, but that environment probably made things worse, especially in the mental health department. Prisons need more people like this. Hell, the entire world needs more people like this. If you want to see the owl picture too, then don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more amazing stories like this one. Story 5. It was only one day, part of a succession of very short internships to show us various places where psychologists work. While the day in the prison, there's the low security guys, with an ambience basically like a kindergarten. Most of them seem to be there due to mental issues or violence. And there's the medium security guys, actually more serious, but wouldn't stay around them a lot. They apparently are mostly short-term prisoners who are there for mostly non-physical crimes like scams, fraud, etc., etc. Then there's the high security guys. The owl actually looks like it's from an American show, some big angry dudes slamming the hell out of the gates. Then you see 5 guys in a corner with laptops. What are they doing there? I ask. Oh, they play League of Legends. They sit there because it's where the Wi-Fi is best. Damn! I can play LOL in prison? Alright. Story 6. My father spent 30 years of his life working in 2 prisons. First, as a head of penitentiary department in half-open facility. Not sure of proper title, he was responsible for inmates' evaluation in a specific block. Then as a warden of a closed one, for more severe, dangerous cases. Here's some of what I heard from all those years. This happened in Poland. There was one time a semi-successful attempt of an escape by an inmate who, before count, managed to build a simple structure to climb a wall, and threw multiple blankets and a barbed wire to get over it. The prison was located in the middle of nowhere, with fields of wheat surrounding it. As he made his run into a fully grown field, a guard from a tower noticed the man and started, at first, shouting warnings, to then fire warning shots into the air. With no response whatsoever, he fired exactly 1 round in the direction of an escapee, was well on his way into the field. The guard managed to get a direct hit with an AK-47, a standard choice of weapon for this position in mid-eastern countries. This happens from a distance of 400 meters, early in the evening with reduced visibility. The guard, however, was awarded for his deeds, and most importantly, the golden shot he made. As everything was going by the protocol and the passing of an inmate was a necessary last resort he could have called for, he was well known in the crew for years after the incident for his sharp shooting skills. Shook his hand when I was a kid. Lovely-looking guy. You wouldn't say he can take someone's life. A man once barricaded himself in the cell. This is, for context, a very stressful situation to be in, as in such a case you need a negotiator on scene, and it's generally considered a high-risk situation because of the possibility of self-hurt. If you just wanted your workday to go by, well, it's one of the moments it all goes down the drain and every single person in the building is going to ask questions, not to mention people above. This is speaking from a perspective of a position head of penitentiary my father had. The fault falls into his hands, as in why did this happen in the first place? Anyway, as the negotiations went south and the man stalled, having some demands about something that was never going to happen, the call was made to break into the cell and pacify the troublemaker. The guards loaded special ammunition into their shotguns for breaching such doors. Few blasts and they went in. He harmed himself, and it adds another layer of complexity because now you need a doctor on scene, which prolongs everything, and the inmate can get a permanent health damage. The inmate was known for his psychological instability and, surprisingly, was in the middle of serving a 3-year sentence for alimony. I vividly remember my father talking about how he, I think, was mostly shocked by what humans are capable of doing to get their attention in desperation. If I remember correctly, despite a long week of reports and explaining for my father, the man has had his passes revoked and another year or 2 added to his sentence for his behavior. They managed, of course, to get him off the chair in the end and everything, but it's one of those days that adds a pack of gray hair onto you. During a yearly training of the hostage situation at another prison, a SWAT team was invited to participate for the first time. This was a novum, as before it was more of a standardized walkthrough of a protocol, so that everyone knows their cans and can'ts should the situation arise. Sadly, no one cared to inform the unit they were training with civilians, specifically a middle-aged beer-bellied gentleman who just wanted to get this done and go back home watching ski jumping. During the first breach practice, the SWATs went full force through the windows, down from the roof, knocking down glass and throwing flashbangs onto the scene upon landing. If your job was pushing pencils all day around, you can imagine how unprepared those folks were when this happened. 2 people got to the hospital. Other 2, friends of my father, had grenades blown up nearby. Both of them don't hear in one ear to this day. Slow government job? Well, as you can see, not very much in certain times. I'm pinpointing, not really as someone's mistake in this situation, but rather a misconduct that was a prevalent part of this job, putting you at high risks in the moments where you really couldn't expect it. It's one of many cases where documents and signatures were more important than you, and you were forced to play an unfair game against the institution. I have to add the practice was obligatory. Okay, last one. And frankly, it's the weirdest one to tell. It's not so obviously disturbing, but when I first heard it, I had shivers on my back. Probably because I could see my father's eyes while he was talking about it. So as a warden, he gets a visit from our country's intelligence agents. It's a typical Tuesday. You show up at work, and after your rounds and quick coffee, the secretary calls there are 2 unscheduled gentlemen waiting in front of your door from the agency. The agency is kind of a CIA type of thing. This already doesn't smell good, because what the hell? They went from a prison full of already sentenced people. The gentlemen walk into my father's office, and generally this is how the conversation goes. Mr. X? They start. Yes, good morning. We are Agent Y and this is Agent Z from the agency. Going straight to the matter, they continue. We are aware you had a new shipment of inmates yesterday afternoon after around 4 p.m. Yes, we had. Among those men, there is one gentleman listed as Mr. B with a sentence of 8 years. That is correct, yes. And he's designated for sentence in A-Wing and solitary cell. Yes. Mr. X, what you're about to hear is for your ears and your deputy ears only, and he's already been informed. Said gentleman is not really Mr. B. As this is his operative name as a Russian intelligence officer, this is a national security matter, and this gentleman is under our observation. Agents hinting at my father, the guy doesn't know his cover is blown, then they continue. Under no circumstances, I repeat, no circumstances, anything bad can happen to this gentleman. After a visible break of confusion, I understand. He's now under your responsibility, and we will monitor the situation as well as you. Again, do not discuss the subject with anyone else. Is everything clear? I suppose, yes. Good. And have a good day. And so they leave. So this looks straight from a Hollywood movie, but from the perspective of a rather hardworking, everyday guy who just got mixed into something smelling so bad it goes for miles. For starters, in a closed prison for people with the worst senses, you really can't guarantee anyone's safety 100%. It's your job, of course, and you have to try anyway, but let's be honest. If someone wants to do something, they will find a way. As a warden, you are responsible for your inmate's safety. But you've seen TV shows, you know how this works. It really often does. So you come back home with the stress of, number one, trying to do impossible, overreach your capabilities as a chief, to protect a man you don't care about. This is expanded by the fact that now you might have to do things you can't rationalize to anyone and will, for example, put your subordinates' trust towards you at risk. Number two, being investigated, wiretapped, and listened to. Number three, not knowing what consequences a failure will bring. I never heard how this one ended. Might be that the matter simply dissolved over time. But I certainly wouldn't want to be dragged into national matters in my normal weekday job without my consent. This just happened there, and where wasn't even an option out. There are so many more, but let's end here. Mostly sharing this for people to see that the very institution that I guess strives for certain stability is inherently an unstable one. If you'd think this can be a steady government job, it's really not. Maybe different countries have it better. There's also a chance all of this was a big revelation to me back when I heard it, because for years I thought Father was having a very boring job. He only started talking after retirement and quite a few drinks. Imagine if all of that was just a prank and nobody actually got to tell him. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.